never thought I'd check my hair so much, making sure that every hair is in place. And if you are watching right now on YouTube, you know that's not the case. And well, I used to work at the Mandalay Bay years and years ago, and had an unfortunate little, when I say a little accident, my mom was driving my car. She got into an accident, and for a while there, I didn't have a car. And I remember I made a deal with God when I didn't have the car and there was no prospects at all, that I would have $10,000 to be able to put down on the next vehicle so I wouldn't put myself in a financial trick. Well, at that time, $10,000 was comparable to $100,000 today. I mean, it was like so out of reach. It was one of those things. But again, I made a deal with God. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but I made a deal with God based off of my current circumstances, not thinking about the future. Well, I made this deal, I have $10,000, whatever it was. And I remember walking into the Mandalay Bay. I stopped by, my buddy Rick Belcastro was working the door, and his family was one of the owners of the Mercedes dealer there in Las Vegas. And I said, hey, Rick, can you get me in touch with your family so I can buy a Mercedes? Because that's ultimately what I want. He said, yeah, I can do that, but why don't you come and look at my Lexus? And I was like, well, I don't even know what that is. And I don't want a Lexus. I want a Mercedes. That's what I was thinking in my head. But he's like, no, you need to come and see it. So after work, he takes me back to the parking lot, and we walk up, and it's this amazing car. It's black. It's got rims on it. It's got the stereo system. I mean, it is unreal. I've never seen anything like this. And then he begins to bargain with himself. I wasn't even negotiating at all, but he said, I've got a buyer for it, and they're going to buy it for $36,000, but I want you to have it. And so I'll give it to you for 28. And I was like, I'm not even negotiating here. And he said, you know what? And if you want it, you don't even have to worry about the money right now. Just tell me you want it, and that's it. And, the car is yours, and I'll save it for you. And I was just so blown away by this situation that I'm like, oh, well, I made a deal with God that I have to have $10,000, and I don't have any money right now in the bank. And so, I prayed about it, asked my pops about it. We went down, we did the pros and cons. We put it on the prayer list. And it was amazing because it was about 28 days. It wasn't a full 30 days, but it was about 28 days. In my bank account was $10,600. Not only the $10,000 to be able to put down on the car, but also the $600 to be able to register it. But what was crazy about it is the way that it came about was I got refunds from car insurance. I got refunds from, the car that I owned before that got totaled. I got refunds from the power company saying that I paid too much. I got checks out of the blue, which I knew it wasn't out of the blue. It was a blessing. But what God did is through that 28 days, he provided that $10,000, not only that, but the $600 to be able to register. And what he wanted me to know is that I want you, beyond any shadow of a doubt, to know that it was me, and then you'll tell the story about what is happening. And so, this was a tough thing, because when I first set out on this time frame, 28 days, and I didn't make that much money, let alone be able to save that much money in a month. What God was saying is, trust me. And when you trust me, I'll be able to bring the blessing. And when I bring the blessing, you'll have to tell the story of me. So in Proverbs 20, I believe it's in 22, Proverbs 22, it talks about the benefits of trusting God. And I'm excited to be able to share that with you today on another episode of Inchstones. So let's get this party started.
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
If you're tuning in for the first time, you've tuned into The Vibe, which is our podcast here. And we have 3 different shows on the podcast. One where I interview some of the most iconic people in the world. They give advice to my kids by name. Then we have this, which is called Inchstones. We go commentary about 14 to 20 minutes. It's a nice thing to be able to take on your walk, fill up your soul, get some soul food. We research the corresponding proverb, corresponding day, and we want to impart as much wisdom as possible, just going through the challenges of today, but bringing it back to 3,000-year-old wisdom. And then we have a show called You Have to Meet My Friends, where I go live, and then I call my friends randomly. They have no idea that they're on the podcast until they're actually on the podcast. So welcome. If this is your first time tuning in, check out the book on Amazon. It's called The Vibe. And there's 5 major components. 1, culture. 2, systems. 3, productivity. 4 is innovation. And 5 is the ability to adapt immediately. But they're all powered by the secret ingredient that changes everything, which is the vibe. And what is the vibe? It's not the energy that you bring into the room. It is simply the way that people feel when you leave. And when you create an irresistible vibe by taking your heart set, which is your belief system, your mindset, which is your intentions, and your skill set, which is your actions, and you put those in line, you create an irresistible vibe, and then your offer, your product, your price, it all falls away, and people just want to be a part of what it is that you're doing. So today in Proverbs 22, when we're going through, what was amazing is it reminded me of that story of buying what I call my first luxury car. And, I got my friend had negotiated against himself. He said 36 that a lady was buying it for. He offered it to me for 28. Well, I had made a deal with God that I had to have $10,000 to be able to put down. Well, that was a lot of money, but he provided it over time. And there was no way for me to be able to explain all the things that happened. I just had to give credit to God. So I got to tell this story this was probably 1999, 2000, right around in that time. And so for 24 years, I've got a chance to be able to tell the story. And the story is most of the time the most important thing. And what God wants us to know is when we trust him, then he'll bring the blessing. When he brings the blessing, then we get to tell the story. And so as in Proverbs 22, it just kind of listed off like all the benefits of what it means to trust him. So when you trust him, these are all the benefits. And it's wild as I went down through and looked at it, because in verse 1, it said a good name. And this is probably one of my favorites, because I think a lot of times people look circumstantially. We were talking about it yesterday in our men's group, and one of our friends, was having a little challenge. He was having some challenges financially, and he was thinking like, I'll make it better. I just got to work harder. I got to do this stuff. And what we started to pour into him and pour some wisdom into him is we've got to get to the root of the problem, right? We got to get to the root of the challenge. The challenge is not the money aspect of it. Sometimes it's just communication. And that communication, 99% of challenges in life or in business come down to communication. It's not the challenge, that's the circumstance, but let's look at the underlying part of it. And most of the time it's just communication. How are we communicating to ourselves, or how is our mind communicating to us, or our memories or our experience communicating how finances should work? Well, we have amazing people in our men's group here in Carlsbad on Tuesday at 7:30 every week that you could come to. It's completely complimentary. We'd love to have you. And we got so many great guys in that we're like, hey, this is the way that I've seen money work well for me. Well, then it started to change a little bit of perspective. But as we began to talk through this challenge with one of our buddies, it had very little to do with the financial side. It had to do with communication. And not only his communication by himself, but also with his, fiance and all these things. And we wanted to make sure that as he moves forward, that it's not the same problem or challenge over and over again, that it simply becomes something that he can solve through wisdom and through principle-based decisions. And we were saying that that's how we gain a good name. Like a good name is the most valuable thing that you'll ever invest in, because when your name is synonymous with great things, with integrity, with good in life. I mean, a good name, I tell you, is probably one of the most valuable things. And, I had a friend, my buddy, Patrick Hummel, he's going to be coming on the podcast soon. And actually next week, he's a partner with Michael Mina, and they're partnered in Table One Hospitality. And Patrick has a great name. Like, since 1999, since I've known him, he's been an upstanding guy. He has incredible integrity, and he is the absolute best at what he does. He creates some of the greatest culinary experiences in the entire world. And getting to sit down with Patrick, I know that he's going to give me sage advice because his name is so good. I spent a lot of time on that one part of it, but I tell you that one of the hugest benefits of trusting God is that he will help you to foster a good name. And in verse 3, God will give you thought of the future. That's prudence. Prudence is not the coolest word in the world, but when we take thought of the future, we breathe. And we slow down a little bit. And we take thought of the future. The world looks a little bit different. One of my friends, so we called him Cousin, I think it was Cousin Vic. And Cousin Vic I met in Cannes. We were there for a wedding, and he said, life looks different at 3.5 miles an hour. And I said, what do you mean? He said, when you walk to a place, you see different things. And he walked across a couple of states, and he said, I saw things different because I was at 3.5 miles per hour. I mean, which is pretty crazy, right? So thought of the future. Verse 4 and 5, benefits that God will give you when you trust him is he'll give you humility that will produce riches, honor, and life. Imagine that. Imagine if we slowed down and we were like, okay, well, trusting God will give me humility that will produce riches, honor, and life. Well, I'm in, but most of the time it's not opposed to us that way. It's like, a relationship with God is like, oh, he's going to come down on you. You got to do all these things. You got to, and your life's got to be boring and bland. No, it doesn't. It can be amazing. It can be joyful. It can be full of love. And, and that's what God wants for us. And he'll bring humility into your life. He'll bring it where you won't have to beat your chest, where other people will sing your praises as opposed to you. And I tell you, third-party validation, it's probably one of the most valuable things that you can have in any business or any relationship is when you have third-party validation, when you have somebody else that says that person is amazing. So do it for somebody else. And that's verse 4 and 5. In verse 8, 15, 26, and 27, he'll give you discipline and insight into finances and investments. And it's incredible because 3,000 years ago, he already knew what we were going to be going through today. And how many of us would love to be able to have discipline? It's not that we lack motivation. It's not that we lack inspiration. It's just that we lack discipline to be able to apply it. Because any of the principles, think about it, any of the books that you read, if you actually just applied the principles, any one of them, you just picked one, Think and Grow Rich, you said, Who Moved My Cheese, you pick up the vibe. If you actually apply it, it'll work. It doesn't mean that thing it just means that when you apply things, they actually work. And most of the time, it's just the discipline that we lack, and I talked about that earlier in a past episode about recovery. I'm not very disciplined about recovery. I sat with the doctor yesterday and she asked me about my diet. My diet is it's not very disciplined. I wrote it down. I worked with a trainer, Tony Kress, for like 2 days. And he said, just write down everything that you eat. And I wrote it down and I gave it to him. And he was like, man, this is the most random thing I've ever seen in my life. He said, do you walk by people's tables at a restaurant and just pick something off that you want? Because that's what it looks like. You have no pattern to it. You have no discipline in it. And that's what I was telling my doctor. I have discipline in other areas of my life, but when it comes to, diet, I just don't have a ton of discipline. But imagine if you got discipline and the insight into finances and investments, that you had the insight, you could see that what was actually going to work for you. It's just incredible. That's a benefit of trusting God. And in verse 9 is generosity. I talk about my buddy, Gary Spellman, a lot. And Gary Spellman is just, if you met him, he is the example of generosity. And he's just constantly generous to every single person around him. He's never looking out for himself. He's just looking at every single other person. And when you trust God, he'll foster that in you. In verse 10 through 12, God will, when you trust him, he'll foster kind words, speaking life, and he'll provide unlimited knowledge. Pump the brakes right there, right? Pump the brakes. Kind words, what is that? That build other people up and add value to their life. He'll help you to speak life, which is saying their name and telling people specifically how they inspired you today. And then he will provide unlimited knowledge. Can you imagine if you just had unlimited knowledge? Imagine how much we spend. My daughter the other day was looking at a college fair and she was looking at Seton Hall and they were saying that it's going to be $50,000 a year. I mean, which isn't, abnormal for today. You could pay $80,000, $70,000, $60,000 a year and you get limited knowledge. That means over the course of 4 years on the low end, $50,000. That's $200,000 for 4 years of limited knowledge. And what God is saying is, when you trust me, I'll provide unlimited knowledge. Man, verse 13, 14, 16, 22, and 23, he said that he'll provide diligence, which is right work, and discernment. I tell you, can you imagine if you just had discernment? Like, insight is one thing. Like, I have a little bit of insight into this place, but when you have discernment, saying that that thing is cool, but I know it's not for me, that is probably one of the most powerful things that you'll ever be able to do in your life. That's cool, but it's not for me. That's what discernment is. It's not for me right now. Like, this is what my mom said to me, you could do anything that you put your mind to, but just because you could do it does not make it right for you, son. Well, there's so many things out there that we can chase, and we can look and say, yeah, can I do it? Yeah, you can if you put your mind to it. Absolutely, you could do it, but does it make it right? That's discernment. And so he'll give us diligence and discernment. In verse 17 and 19, he promises that if you trust him, the cost is low and the return is exponential. It'll start with your ears. It'll go to your heart. Once your heart is full, it'll come out your lips. And once you start speaking about it, your hands will start to do it. So just be conscious of what you invest in. Be conscious of what you see. Be conscious of what you hear, because it'll get inside your heart. Once it gets inside your heart, it fills up, comes out your mouth. Once it comes out your mouth, your hands will start doing it. So just be conscious of that, right? And in verse 20 and 21, if you trust him, he'll help you to be able to seek wisdom, listen to it, and apply it in your life. And then he'll give you the words to be able to tell the story. It's so much easier to tell a story of what you've gone through as opposed to what you read and what you want to recite. This is the difference between a person falling in love, like with the result, or connecting with a story, right? And you think about this, Kendra Hall, amazing, amazing storyteller. She talks about the power of a story, right? If you haven't read her books, I would definitely suggest it. She's incredible. She was on the podcast, and it was awesome to be able to spend time with her. But Kendra Hall, she talks about the story. It's a lot of times it's not just about the product. It's about the story that you tell about it. It's the story that you tell yourself. It's the story that you tell your customer. It's the story that your customer tells themselves about the thing. It's not always the features and benefits. In most cases, it's not. But God will give you the words, because he will take you through the experience. If you seek wisdom, you listen, and you apply it, then he'll give you exponential amounts of stories. People ask me all the time, like, how can you go on the podcast and do it every day? Or, sometimes I miss a day. But how can you do that? Because God's word is evergreen. So he's going to constantly keep having me live, and then I get to tell the story, right? And so I just want to encourage you with that. In verse 24 and 25, he says that he'll give you patience, peace, and joy. Imagine that. Patience, peace, and joy. Patience, peace in the eye of the storm, right? And then joy. What's joy? Art of falling in love with your current circumstances and allowing magic to happen. In verse 28, he said that if you trust him, he'll give you respect. He'll give you respect for the people who came before you. And I tell you, there's nothing more attractive than a person that has respect for their environment, respect for the people who came before them, respect for their craft, respect for the people around them. Respect is something that is, it's probably one of the most unheralded traits that will get you every single thing that you want if you simply respect people. And as we finish up in verse 29, watch this: unwarranted, unfair, and unqualified advantage. When you trust God, he will give you unwarranted, unfair, and unqualified advantage. Unwarranted. You didn't set out to do that thing. Unfair, because when you're working with him and you trust in him, like, it's like having the greatest player in the world on your team in kickball. Like, you win. Right? And then unqualified. He'll put you in rooms that you're not qualified to be in. I got a chance to speak at NiftyCon, which was amazing, being a keynote speaker, and now being able to go into places and speak in the financial world, in the law world, in dentistry, in the medical, all these things that I get a chance to speak at conferences with. The reason why is because I trust him, not because I'm qualified for it. And that's verse 29. So there's nothing too big or too small for him. Give it to him and allow him, allow the blessing, and then tell the story. God just wants you to give it to him. When you give it to him, he'll bring the blessing into your life. And then you go and tell the story about your experience. And guess what? You'll have to put the emphasis on him, because if not, well, I would invite you to, because if not, most likely those blessings will turn off like a faucet. So hopefully you have a phenomenal day. It's been incredible with you. Tune in to Inchstones, and also You Have to Meet My Friends, and also the interview show where I get to interview some of the most iconic people in the world. This has been Proverbs 22. Go buy the book. Go buy Bling. Come to the Vibe Room. Comment, like, subscribe, notify yourself. Do all the stuff. You know what you need to do. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and so on.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never know, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.